The PS3, the sleek and simple box that marked the end of the early 2000s with memorable games like Modern Warfare 2, Black Ops, MGS4, and Little Big Planet. It definitely is one of my favorite consoles of all time. But there's more than meets the eye with this thing. Despite being simple looking, the PS3 is actually one of the weirder consoles out there. From being used by the government to dying for absolutely no reason, there really is a lot to unpack with Sony's Black Sheep, which is why I've compiled a lot of facts and trivia into an iceberg chart, and I believe I've created the definitive PS3 iceberg. So, without further ado, let's hop into layer 1. If you didn't know, the PS3 can actually play Blu-ray discs and even DVD discs. This is mostly because Sony advertised the PlayStations as the ultimate media machines. The PS2 can play movies too, and both the PS2 and 3 can even play audio CDs, burnt and original ones. This entry refers to the three main models that the PS3 has. The Fat is the original release, the Slim is the second release, and the Super Slim is the final release. Just like their names imply, the console variations do get smaller and quieter with each model. So, for some early models of the original Fat PS3, it was actually backwards compatible with PS2 games and even PS1 games. This was later removed in later models of the Fat and the subsequent revisions, however, and it's important to note that you can also mod the Slim to be able to play PS2 games. However, it doesn't run the game similarly to the Fat, and fortunately, Super Slims can't do any of that. A lot of people may not know, but the PlayStation Network started with the PS3. It was completely free and you could add up to 100 players as your friends. Trophies weren't actually added though, they were added 2 years later when Xbox introduced achievements. PSN made online gaming mainstream for console players at the time along with Xbox Live, and a lot of people actually bought the PS3 over the Xbox since PSN was free.
If you can guess what the title is going to be by the way this game will actually start. As a matter of fact, this screen also brings back memories for me as well. I'm sure it does for some of you, and I'm sure you're dating yourself by saying that you remember. I don't know if you remember this particular opening. This was actually on the original PlayStation game as well when it was loading the game. Of course, I'm not a very good player even there. Game is powered by Namco. It's Ridge Racer. Ridge Racer. Remember that one? All right, so let me go right ahead, get right into the game. Oh, this brings back memories. I don't know if it's just me, but here we go. Whoops.
So, for the Fat model of the PS3 and even the games that were released at the time, Sony actually used the Spider-Man font, and it is intentional. Sony thought that by doing this, the PS3 would be more popular and it would sell more, and it obviously didn't work since they changed the logo with the release of the later models. A lot of great games are still stuck on the PS3. I'm making a video about this. Games like Little Big Planet, the Resistance and Killzone trilogy, and most famously, Metal Gear Solid 4. These games are still stuck on the PS3 and haven't seen a re-release or a remaster. Hen, Rebug, and Han, also Rogero, are the custom firmwares you can install onto your PS3. Rebug and Rogero only work with the Fat models, while Hen, Han, and I think Evil Nat works on all systems. There's actually a lot of custom firmwares, but the most popular ones are Hen and Rebug. This entry refers to the traumatic-ass baby ad for the PS3, which you have 100% seen in some compilations of scariest ads of all time. And if you haven't, good luck, cause I'm gonna play it for you right now. This entry refers to the fact that a lot of games will have the 3D compatible icon on the case, which means that if you had a TV that supported 3D, you could play the game as if it was a 3D movie. There was also a special TV by Sony where it was meant for playing 3D games on the PS3. 6-axis controllers were the controllers at launch. They're terrible, they're light, and they feel cheap. They also have no rumble. Later down the line, the DualShock 3 was released and was basically the 6-axis with rumble, a better feel, and weight, so it was just a revision of the 6-axis. This entry actually refers to the 12 launch titles for the PS3. Blazing Angels, Squadrons of World War II, Call of Duty 3, Genji, Days of the Blade, Madden NFL 07, Marvel Ultimate Alliance, Mobile Suit Gundam Crossfire, NBA 2K7, NHL 2K7, Resistance Fall of Man, Ridge Racer 7, Tiger Woods PGA Tour 07, and Tony Hawk's Project 8. So, the massively popular series The Last of Us started on the PS3 and for some reason got fucking remastered for the PS4, and it's getting remastered again. The reason it's on here is because a lot of people tend to forget that it does come from the PS3, mostly because of the PS4 release. But, oh well, I guess it's getting a PS5 release too. So, this is actually a pretty cool fact. In 2010, the US Air Force Laboratory needed a supercomputer for their needs. But then they found out that the cost would be too expensive. So they did the research and realized that the PS3 offered the exact hardware resources it needed. And with other OS, they were able to turn 1700 PS3 units into a supercomputer, naming it the Condor Cluster. It's a crazy fact that I like to tell people about because it sounds so absurd for some reason, but it's true. Just like the red ring of death, the PS3 has the yellow light of death. If the console had bad soldering, power supply issues, or graphical issues, or any issues really, it would refuse to boot, and the light would turn yellow before subsequently dying. Depending on the issue, however, the yellow light of death can be fixable. PlayStation Home was a hub where people had 3D virtual avatars and could customize stuff and hang out with other people. It was basically the PlayStation's MMO, but it unfortunately shut down in 2015. So, Resistance Fall of Man, a pretty good launch title, but this entry talks about a certain controversy regarding one of the missions in the game. In one of the missions, you partake in a shootout in the Manchester Cathedral, a real church in the United Kingdom. The church in the real life had already dealt with violent attacks and felt that this was in terrible taste, and demanded that the mission be changed. Sony ended up not changing the mission though, and anything about the game, and instead publicly apologized and set up a donation for anti-violence in Manchester. Fun fact, in the early days of the PS3, you could actually install Linux onto the system, which is why the US Air Force Laboratory were able to use them in the first place. It was unfortunately removed in 2010, which led to backlash and a lawsuit against Sony, which is an entry on this iceberg. So the PS3 actually has a hidden recovery mode. If you hold down the power button continuously until you hear 2 beeps instead of 3, you boot into recovery mode. You could restore files or even fix corrupted firmware on here. It's a useful menu when you experience issues with the system or even want to install a custom firmware, wink wink. This is gonna be a quick entry. The original fat model had 4 USB ports, while the slim and super slim only have 2. The reason Sony cut the USB ports was to save on costs, as the slim and super slim were more budget friendly compared to the fat. Another pretty quick entry. Backwards compatibility was removed as to cut costs with the Slim and the Super Slim. And another reason it was removed was because the PS3 didn't actually emulate PS2 games too well. Nowadays, the backwards compatible models are rarer than the ones that aren't, and they're prone to yellow lighting and just dying over time. In April 20th, 2011, the PlayStation Network was hacked and taken offline. The outage lasted 23 days, making it up to this point the longest time a gaming service has went offline. Over 77 million users' personal information had been breached, like literally exposed. Name, addresses, passwords, and even credit card information. And Sony was criticized for how long it took for them to respond to the breach, and even for their safety practices, as a multi-million-dollar company was able to be breached. It was a pretty bad event. So, if Nintendo had the Wiimote and Xbox had the Kinect, what did Sony have? Well, they had the PlayStation Move. The biggest use was for games like Sports Champions, basically Sony's Wii Sports. The PlayStation Move wasn't as popular as the Wii or even the Kinect, so slowly over time Sony stopped supporting it. It was later revived though and brought back onto the PlayStation VR, but nobody uses that anyway, so who the hell cares? The RSX is the PS3's graphics chip. It was notorious for failing and killing your console. See, the RSX used lead-free solder, and for any of my fellows out there who don't know what that means, it means that the solder cracked and grew brittle faster. And since the PS3 fat was notorious for heating up hard, guess what happened to that solder when it constantly heated up? Yup, it cracked. Not only that though, the RSX would heat up like crazy and would cause thermal stress. Nowadays, it's common for people to open up their PS3 fats, rebar the solder, or just reapply the thermal paste. In later models of PS3s, Sony revised the RSX so it would just not die randomly. This entry refers to how Little Big Planet was a pioneer of user-generated content. You could create and share levels online on the game way before other games like Minecraft became popular. The stuff that would be posted on here was absurd. It ranged from levels, puzzles, games, and all the way to actual movie recreations. However, all good things must come to an end, and in 2021, as a response to multiple server attacks, Sony shut down the Little Big Planet servers on the PS3. Rare games are normal for consoles, but the PS3 had a lot of rare games. Stuff like Africa, Puppeteer, and even Deadpool are rare. They became rare because they had low sales or low print runs and eventually were delisted. Agent is a game by Rockstar, the developers of GTA and Red Dead. Agent was supposed to be a spy game where you play as I shit you not, an agent. I speak in past tense here though, since the game was never released. In fact, it's notorious for being announced and having no news or anything ever coming out of it. Even though Rockstar renews the trademark for it, nothing has come out, and it's most likely cancelled. There actually was a PS3 bundle which came with a Blu-ray copy of Spider-Man 3. This is because again, Sony owns Spider-Man movie rights, and since they basically made the film, they thought that bundling it would be a great way to promote the film and to flex the fact that they own Spider-Man. Nothing really special, just a fun bundle, really. This ugly ass balls controller. So you'll notice on Steam, every canon Metal Gear game except for Peace Walker and 4 has been ported, remastered, and released on there. Peace Walker doesn't really count as you can play that on Xbox and PS3. What does count though is MGS4 Guns of the Patriots. This game has never been ported, remastered, or anything. The whole reason why is because the game heavily utilizes the RSX chip and the cell processing CPU, which means that in order for the game to run well on systems without those, Konami would have to rebuild the game from scratch. And God forbid Konami ever release a new Metal Gear game that aren't pachinko slot machines. This entry is going to be really short, but the PS3 store is still operational in 2025. It was supposed to shut down years ago, but people got really angry, and Sony decided that they would still keep it up. Just like with Metal Gear Solid 4, a lot of games utilize the cell processor, CPU, and the RSX chip. The PS4 just simply doesn't have that, it's built differently. Because of that, native PS3 backwards compatibility just isn't possible. At one point, the PS3 was the most used device for Netflix streaming. This is because it was one of the first devices out there to come with Netflix. And again, Sony wanted this to be the ultimate media machine. Like, hell, you can even listen to Spotify on here. Folding at Home is a computing project by Stanford University. It studies protein folding, and protein folding studies are key to understanding diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer. Now I know what you're asking. What does the PS3 have to do with this? Well, folding at home required insane amounts of processing power to run the computations. Now what does the PS3 have? A strong cell processor. In 2007 to 2012, Sony added the Folding at Home app where if you weren't using your PS3, you could just launch it and donate a lot of your processing power to Stanford University to run the computing simulations. Over 15 million PS3s donated computing power and was even at one point the biggest donors of processing power. The support for Folding at Home ended in 2012 since computers had advanced much more and had become more powerful at the time. This entry refers to how Sony executives would say that the PS3 is unhackable, when in fact, it is hackable. So, if you scroll on your XMB, you might notice that there are PSP and PS Vita utilities. This is because some games allow remote play. You just connect your consoles via internet and you'd be able to play some games on either handheld. The PS3 holds some pretty obscure world records, like most realistic driving simulation for Gran Turismo 5, most amount of players in a console shooter for a massive action game, and largest console supercomputer with Folding at Home. There are more, but these are just the ones that I noted. When Sony removed Other OS in 2010, they were sued for false advertising, breach of contract, and violation of consumer protection laws. Now, the reason they removed Other OS was because they were scared that people would use it to jailbreak the console, which it didn't, but it did certainly help speed up the process. In 2016, Sony settled and agreed that users who could prove that they had Other OS installed were paid $55, and users who bought a PS3 during Other OS's inclusion and didn't install it were paid $9. George Hotz, also known by his online username GeoHot, was the person who jailbroke the PS3. In 2010, he released the first ever jailbreak, but it was in 2011 when he posted the system root keys which allowed for custom firmware to be installed. GeoHot was then sued by Sony in 2011 for this, and they settled. GeoHot agreed to never hack Sony products ever again to avoid jail time. HD Collections refers to the rare, usually triple pack games, which included remastered PS2 or PS1 games. Some examples are the Sly Collection, the Metal Gear HD Collection, and the God of War HD Saga, which I have. These games are rare, they saw limited releases and can't be played natively on the PS4 and can only be played on the PS3. They're a cool thing to have in your collection, and it really makes it stand out more. NBA Elite 11 is the rarest PS3 game you have never heard of. It was supposed to be a reboot of the NBA Live series, and when EA released the demo, game-breaking bugs were discovered. Broken AI, shots just flying, and T-posing characters for no reason. When EA realized this, they canceled the game days before it was supposed to be released. But some copies had been shipped out to retailers and thus were able to escape. Nowadays, a sealed copy is about $10,000 plus, and it's estimated only few hundred copies exist today, making it the rarest PS3 game. And that wraps up the Iceberg. That's it. It was my first time ever making an Iceberg video, and the first time ever making an Iceberg chart. and it's also like my third time making a voiceover video, just why my voice kind of sounds really funny. Now, in my last video, I did have audio issues where it was kind of low, so I hope that the video now doesn't have like low audio issues. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Stay tuned for a couple of more fun videos I am working on. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you all soon. Ha ha ha.